All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on yourcentralvalley.com. Today is Thursday, the 11th of March, 2021. Well, as you well know, it is Women's History Month, and it's pretty much just a time for celebrating women and their achievements both around the world and here locally. So, throughout the remainder of the month, we will be having a conversation with different women from all walks of life locally who have achieved amazing things and continue to break boundaries both in and around the workforce. So, joining us today, we have Dr. Goldsmith, who has been recognized on state and national levels as an expert on workforce development, contextualized learning, and career technical education. So, she is joining us now live. Good afternoon, Dr. Goldsmith.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for asking me to join you and spend a little time with you today. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.
Of course, the pleasure is ours. So, I know you have spent over 20 years in a variety of educational leadership roles, most recently as, of course, president of Fresno City College. And it does seem that you spent the majority of your career in education. So, just what made you decide to get into this sector in the first place?
It's interesting, and it's probably been more than 20 years, but who's counting years, right? I had a wonderful opportunity as a young child to have some great teachers, and then perhaps also as much as a learning opportunity as it was, had some teachers who maybe weren't as kind as possibly they could be. So I understood at a very early age the power and the influence of teaching and how it can shape careers and young people's lives. But believe it or not, I didn't want to go into education as a youngster. I was really interested in NASA and science, and as a matter of fact, my favorite show was Star Trek, and I
Nice.
really wanted to go into maybe a science field. I loved history as well, so I think that influenced me a great deal because both science and history, career and law, I knew one thing is that I wanted to influence and change our community for a better community. And so as I began to study history and understand more about science, I knew I wasn't going to be an astronaut, much like my beloved characters that I grew up loving watching television shows like Star Trek. But there was a program, it was called the American Teacher and Astronaut Program. And many of you may recall Krista McAuliffe, who was an educator, and she was going to be the first teacher in space. And she had a quote, because I teach. And that really resonated with me. And like so many people I think it was 1980, the Challenger disaster happened. It really shook my sense of ability of what we can and should do as a nation, and it really made me change who I wanted to be. I wanted to become a teacher then. And so it was then I really focused on becoming a history teacher. And it's interesting, this year marked the 35th anniversary of the Challenger disaster. And I feel now more than ever, we really need to honor our teachers and what they do. I'm so incredibly impressed, whether they're elementary school, high school, or college or university, especially now. Many of them are teaching virtually, some are teaching on ground. And regardless of what people do in the education level, whether it's in the classroom or preparing school lunches or working in a district office, making sure people get paid, or cleaning the schools and classrooms, we have a great deal of gratitude and respect and admiration. I think we need to show all of our educators, K through 16. I'm really honored to serve with them during this most difficult time for our community and our world. So, like Krista McAuliffe, who really focused her life on education because she wanted to make a better future. That's exactly what our educators are doing
Right.
today, and I'm just really proud to be a part of that.
Yeah, definitely. Educators play such an important role for these kids, whether it's K through 12 or college students as well. And throughout your career, you've served on a number of boards, including United Way, California Community College Administrators of Occupational Education, and San Joaquin Clean Energy Organization. But perhaps most notably, you were appointed by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and later reappointed by Governor Edmund G. Brown Jr. to serve on the board of directors of the California Partnership of the San Joaquin Valley, right? So just tell us about that and what was the conversation you had with the governor?
Well, it's interesting. I have been blessed, and I understand that my position has afforded me the opportunity to meet with actually three governors. I've had the opportunity to meet with Governor Schwarzenegger, Governor Brown, and of course, most recently, Governor Newsom. And when I met with Governor Schwarzenegger, one is a little starstruck, of course, and he is and continues to be a fan and a supporter of community college. He was very concerned about making sure all of our students had the ability to get a community college education, to go on to the university or learn a trade. And he was very supportive of our nursing program here locally. It was an honor to be able to meet with him. And then, of course, Governor Brown, he has transformed education in our state. He signed AB 705, which changed how we look at students coming from high school. We now put students directly in college level English and math, which really has forever changed the trajectory of our students. Governor Brown understood what students are capable of with the right support. And, now AB 705, which requires colleges to use high school grades rather than a standardized test to put people into the right college level. It really has accelerated education for so many of our Valley students and really has given them an opportunity to complete college level courses within a year. Governor Brown really understood the power of education, and it was an incredible honor to meet him. And then most recently, I had an opportunity to meet with Governor Newsom a few times as he has come to the Valley to learn more about the DRIVE initiative that we have here in Fresno that former Mayor Ashley Swearingen is leading. And he had put together what's called the Governor's Council for Post-Secondary Education, which really envisions a statewide integration of education K through 16. He really understands that in order for California to remain competitive, our diverse students, we really have to do a better job from cradle to career in this education continuum. That's why I'm so proud that he has supported the K through 16 collaborative, which we received $10 million to work with our partners here in the Fresno region to reshape and better collaborate on a number of educational and workforce initiatives. So we can get all types of learners into degree programs that have high opportunities. And it's so important now more than ever with this pandemic. We have to make sure our students stay in these courses and these programs so we can continue to lead the way to recovery out of the pandemic. So I've really been blessed to be able to have space and have an opportunity to meet the last three governors. And I'm really confident that they understand the Central Valley, at least in education, and they've been very supportive. And so I think that speaks volumes of the students here in the Valley, as well as our legislative, both Republicans and Democrats, about making our Valley a better place through education.
Yeah, definitely a lot has changed since the pandemic, especially in education, right? So you've definitely seen education change throughout our state's leadership. But just going back, of course, it's Women's History Month. So who is a woman you personally admire and why?
Well, I get this question, especially this month, a lot. And, like many of you, my first teacher was my mom. And I continue to admire my mom. She's passed now, but she instilled in me a strong work ethic, and she was an avid reader. In fact, I think I got my love of history from my mom. I was probably about 10 years old when this book called My Life, it was an autobiography about Golda Meir. She was the first woman prime minister of Israel. Matter of fact, she was one of the politicians who helped found that country, that state of Israel. She was, I think, the fourth or third prime minister, but she was the first woman to hold that post. And my mom and I read that autobiography together, and Golda Meir was tough. The one lesson I learned from her, and one that my mother also instilled, is that you have to trust yourself. And I think she talks about creating the type of self that you are happy with, and you can look yourself in the mirror, and how do you continue to strive and achieve things that people tell you you can't, but you know you can. So Golda Meir was a big formative person in life. And then of course, Dolores Huerta. Now I had an opportunity to meet with her a few times, and both when I was a president at West Coast College Kalinga, and then she came here and had an opportunity to see her speak and listen to her talk with students and community members. I mean, here's a woman who's in her 80s and still continues to work tirelessly, and not only in advocating for the working poor, women and children, but developing women and men to be leaders in our community. She's the type of person I aspire to be as I grow older. She continues to give back. She travels all around. In fact, she just got her COVID vaccine, I think, from our own assembly member here. She is a staunch supporter of equality, women's equality, defending civil liberties, and supporting education. And of course, making sure our workers and working poor continue to have the rights that we need. And what's interesting about Dolores Huerta, Meir, and my mom is that they saw the potential in every individual, noting that every opportunity you have to meet with somebody and talk with somebody is an opportunity to uplift them, an opportunity for you to reflect the divine inspiration that is in that person that you're meeting. And every chance is an opportunity to change our community for better. So those were some women that I've really had an opportunity to admire, and in the case of the world, I had an opportunity to meet.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of knowledge that we can learn just from these powerhouses that are women, right? So just applying that, how can men and women in the workplace support the advancement of women in whatever career that they choose?
That's a really good question, and I think, oftentimes you hear about this word amplify. How do we amplify the voices of women? Because we've heard a lot lately about equity, and actually it's unfortunate that we've had to hear about it lately. We've been working for equality for a long time, equality for gender, equality for different ethnic groups, and definitely equality for women. How men and women can help each other is by amplifying the voices, and that's a great way to combat unconscious bias. Regardless whether it's meant or not, women are more likely than men to be interrupted. It happens a lot. It even happens to your favorite college president. And I hear it all the time from my female colleagues that they often feel like their ideas haven't been taken seriously unless a man copies it or reiterates it in the room. So one way men can help women is give credit where credit is due. When you hear a female colleague at work being talked over or being interrupted, or worse, having her ideas taken and somebody else picking them up and run with them, speak up and give the mic back to your female colleague. Something you could say as simple as, hey, I don't think Monica was finished getting her point across. Monica, is there something you want to add to that? Or, you're right. I believe that was Marie who came up with that idea. Let's hear a little bit more from Marie. What did she have to say about this? I really think men need to really understand that you do have a place of privilege, and you've had a place of privilege for centuries. And if you want to help spotlight a woman's words, that might otherwise fall on deaf ears. That's a good thing to do. For women out there, and I try to do this as well, try to mentor women and sponsor women to have opportunities for professional development and growth. But ultimately, I think if all of us could just stop and listen more, listen to women, listen to each other. And it sounds so simple, right? Just listen, but we spend so much time and energy and I'm sure you studied this too as a, person in media. How do you speak? How do we become better speakers? How do we get our point across? If we took that same amount of time about how can we become better listeners without listening to what am I going to say next, but really listen with your heart. I think that would be a big win for all of us in our community. Just to listen with your heart. And maybe last thing I'll add for any of the guys who are out there listening and women in power, when someone comes to you, especially a woman, and they come to you with concerns and they're being brave enough to come to you with a problem, listen to their concerns. That's how I think we can help one another.
Right, and it's so interesting that you mentioned that because it sounds like something so simple, and it just all comes down to giving women a voice, right? Just take the time to listen. We're not even talking about financial equality, right? It's just as simple as paying attention to what they have to say.
Exactly, and isn't that kind of what our mothers taught us to do?
Right. Yeah.
So, it's one thing about getting a seat at the table, if it were. It's another thing being heard.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're working on, is trying to, how do we deal with that unconscious bias that exists and it's so pervasive in our society?
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing conversation we've had to talk about for a number of years. But just personally for yourself, what challenges have you faced in your career, and what have you done to overcome them? I imagine it wasn't all smooth sailing, right?
No, absolutely not. A lot of it is, and we talk about microaggressions, and that's the term that we use when people, they talk over you or they don't give your ideas credit, or maybe they make statements or actions that are subtle or sometimes are unintentional that discriminate against women. But a lot of times it really is unintentional. And so I always believe that when people know better, they do better. So whether it's looking at our marginalized minority populations or women issues that are so commonplace, it's really just taking the time to sit down with somebody, oftentimes one-on-one, and kind of walking through and unpacking, hey, when that happened, this is how it made me feel. And this, I need your support. You're my boss, or, you're somebody I work with, and I want to work with you. But when we start looking at speaking truth to power, I understand it's hard and it's scary. But as a society, I think we really have to take an approach where we just have to acknowledge that discrimination does exist, and it's out there, and sometimes, more often than not, it's unintentional, and it is based on race and class and sex and sexual orientation or gender identity. And I'll even say it, white women, we come from a place of privilege, and we sometimes need to just listen to our sisters and listen to others and take a back seat and not put ourselves first, but maybe listen. Again, I keep going back to listen with your heart. And when you see something, call it out. When you hear another female saying that somebody is aggressive, or they're acting like a bulldog, or they're acting, I could use another B word, or shrill, call it out. That's not okay. As women, we need to stand up for one another, and our male colleagues need to stand up for us too. If we could just, again, I keep going back to, if we could just be a little kinder to one another and show each other a little grace, we would have a much, much better world.
Yeah, and that's just the unfortunate truth, right? Is because as much as we'd like to pretend that discrimination isn't there, it still exists, and that's why we do have times throughout the year, such as Women's History Month and International Women's Day, to give light to those situations, right? So, just thinking about the region here locally, do you think historically women have been overlooked, either in Fresno? Of course, nationally, that seems to be more of the problem, but what about in Fresno?
Yeah, I would definitely say women have been overlooked. Nationally, of course, we've not had a woman president. We're really blessed, and we're all excited that we have the first female vice president, a woman of color, and that's still very exciting for so many of us, even though it's over 100 days in now, I believe. But if you think about how many women are in the business world as CEOs, it's still not representative. Or if you look at, the disparity in pay, there was a recent Pew study research paper that talked about, women on average make, 85% that compared to men. So that's like for every dollar a man makes, a woman makes 85 cents. That's not okay. If you look at the issues of, domestic violence, that's not okay. And violence towards women, we're that's been overlooked. And I know many people are working on it, but we need to continue to not be overlooked. And even if you think here locally, yes, we've had two female mayors, I believe, in Fresno, but look how many mayors we've had in the history of Fresno. Well, look at Fresno City College. We've been serving this institution, this community, for over 100 years, and I'm the second female president. So yes, I would say we've been overlooked. Um, but I hope
And
to change that.
yeah, and just talking about education now, looking ahead, how do you hope to expand the educational opportunities at Fresno City College?
Well, right now, like so many other agencies and businesses, we're dealing with the pandemic, and we've learned a lot during this pandemic. And it's really clear that now more than ever, we're determined to serve our students and support one another. And it's really time for us to focus our efforts on what we've learned. So as we continue to return, as we continue to recover, that we become a better institution for our students and for one another and for our community. So for Fresno City College, it's about how we come back, how we continue to transition back. Um, we've had an opportunity because the pandemic forced us to reshape how we deliver instruction in our services. And while the state has issued, a new roadmap for higher education, it's really going to be up to us, everybody at Fresno City College and all the educational institutions, to be more collaborative, to be more transparent, and to be aligned with the needs of what our students and what our economy needs now in the state. We know that we can successfully serve students in person and virtually. And I believe this whole idea of a blended delivery of instruction and student support services, the different formats that we have, it can effectively serve more students and can serve our students better. We've, over the last 4 years, have really been looking at embedding equity in our approach to teaching and how we do business in our delivery systems. And while we continue to create and cultivate by ongoing professional development, how do we make sure our students have the skills and knowledge and abilities to be part of California's economic prosperity? We have a moral imperative to do what's right by our students. And so, I shared with you earlier, we've been serving this community for 100 years. I know we're going to be here for the next 100. It's just going to probably look a little different and with a lot more technology, which I think is a great thing.
Right. So is that the model that you think moving forward will be implemented at Fresno City College? I mean, having the choice for students to either do fully online or in-person classes?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a need for more on ground, and we're continuing to bring on ground. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have operated and provided our education in our first responders, so that's police and fire academies. They've continued on since the beginning of the pandemic, although it looks different. They do some stuff online, but they also are here on ground. All of our healthcare programs, from our nursing program, which is the largest nursing program in the state of California, second largest in the nation, only second to Miami-Dade in Florida. They've been continuing on in this hybrid format, and we have graduated over 200 nurses through the pandemic. Our rad tech program, our dental hygiene program, respiratory, medical assisting, all of those programs have continued to operate safely because our faculty, our staff, and our students realize that they have to follow the new guidelines, and they've been doing it safely. I'm incredibly proud of that. Earlier this summer, we brought back more of our career technical education in automotive and in construction, our AutoCAD program, welding. There are some things you can't do online. You can't weld online. So those programs, you can't build a house online. So those programs continue to come back, and this fall we are been working with our faculty and our administrators, and we'll be bringing anywhere from 25 to 50% of our programs back on ground, depending upon where we're at in our safety tiers. But we know that we have 25% on ground, with the opportunity, if things improve through vaccines. I mean, vaccines open up a great deal of hope, as well as, you know, our indicators in the community continue to get improved. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to come back. But what we've learned is that we can do things virtually. And for many of our students, that works wonderfully. So we're going to keep doing that for students and programs that make sense.
Yeah, and the only thing we can do now is just hope we can, if we haven't already, get the vaccine as soon as possible, right? So my last question to you is for young women out there who are passionate about teaching and want to become an educator in the long run when they grow up. What advice would you give them now?
The simple advice is this: don't be afraid. You can do this, and you may fail, but get back up and try it again. I tell the story, when I was younger, I doubt my high school counselor ever thought I would finish college, much less be the president of a college. So don't let somebody else define who you are. You have that little voice inside you that's telling you and guiding you on who you want to be and who you're divinely inspired to be. Follow that voice. Don't be afraid. Take risks, and along the way, enjoy the ride. Because before you know it, you'll be looking back at 30 years of career and you're thinking, wow, how did I get here? So enjoy the ride, take chances, and call your mom more.
All right, there you go. Call your mom more amid all the great advice that you gave today. Dr. Carole Goldsmith, thank you so much for your time and just inspiring and continue to inspire these young women. Of course, it is a Women's History Month, but this is an ongoing conversation that we should all have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, and stay safe.
All right, thank you so much. So this will do it for us here on yourcentralvalley.com. Stick around as we continue to give you developing news throughout the day. Have a great afternoon.